Hello everybody and welcome back to That Fiction Life. Magnus and Alec have become somewhat of a celebrity couple within the Shadowhunters universe, and their next adventure published, which is The Lost Book of the White by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. It is the sequel to The Red Scrolls of Magic. Don't worry about spoilers for now, I'm going to give you a spoiler-free review. We of course do have another book look makeup, as I adore recreating the Shadowhunters covers. I do have a specific video just dedicated to Red Scrolls of Magic. I'm going to link that down below. Thank you so much to Simon & Schuster for sending me the review copy. So without further ado, let's begin. The Red Scrolls of Magic was one of my favourite books of last year. It was very different for the Shadowhunter Chronicles, as we took a step back from the usual wars that they fight. We had more of an offside adventure. In this book, once again, the Shadowhunters are put into a little bit of a situation as we carry on the plot from the first book. Now, this book was very different to the first installment in the Eldest Curses series, and I would go as far as to say that it doesn't even feel like it's a sequel. It feels very much like a standalone story. Now, you are going to be tripping if you only read this series from the Shadowhunter Chronicles, because unlike Red Scrolls of Magic, which arguably is a good first book for the series because it introduces you to some of the main characters, you see the early relationship of Magnus and Alec, this book skips ahead 3 years. The first book took place in between the Mortal Instruments series, and it mainly followed Magnus and Alec on their European holiday, so it was very distinct from anything else within the universe. This one pulls at so many aspects from the previous books, and I think it's still fine to read if you haven't read the Mortal Instruments, because it is technically a sequel to the Red Scrolls of Magic, but you do not get to see the relationship develop between Magnus and Alec. You jump 3 years where so much has happened. Now, something I was very skeptical about with this book was that in the blurb we already had the mention of the other characters from the Mortal Instruments. So we were expecting to see Jace and Clary, Simon, Isabelle. They pop up way too much in some of the other Shadowhunter books, and this is supposed to be just a Magnus and Alec trilogy. It's supposed to focus on them, and I was so happy that it does. The rest of the characters are truly supporting characters. While they are there present in most of the scenes because they take the journey together. Another thing is that this book really focuses on Magnus's life, and I must admit, a lot of the time I forget that he is immortal and he had a life prior to when we met him in the Infernal Devices and the Mortal Instruments and all of the novellas. But you dive into his relationship with Ragnor and what it was like to be found by the Silent Brothers at the start of his warlock life. Katarina makes an appearance in this book in some of the flashbacks, and it was truly great to be able to learn more about why he is the way he is. We had some great development. He now has to think about people other than himself in dangerous situations. He has to be a lot more rational with his decisions now. I really did love this book, but it didn't shock me as some of the other books in the Chronicles, and it felt very convenient a lot of the time, and things would be resolved too easily. So that's what I'm going to say for non-spoilers. We're now going to move on to a full book talk. So Max now exists. We're diving straight to Magnus and Alec having a family. So like I said in the non-spoilers, if you hadn't read the novellas and the Dark Artifices, where you know that Magnus and Alec had a really gradual relationship and before they started adopting all these children, whereas in book 1 they were having first dates and it was their first holiday and they were very awkward with each other at points because it was a fresh relationship, which, you know, is fine. I don't want to be wasting time with information that I already know, but I do think that it's better if you read all the other Shadowhunter books for that reason. Right, so we're diving into one of the first scenes, and Ragnor is alive, everybody. Have I just been fed lies for the last 5 books that I read? The reason we all thought he was dead was because he faked his death. But he's evil now because he's working with Samuel, who is a prince of hell. Does that ring a bell to you? City of Heavenly Fire having the exact same plot? When him and Shunyan went to Magnus's apartment and Ragnor was holding Max, I was ready to have a breakdown because I knew he would be fine, you know, The whole book, we knew everyone was going to be fine because of the dark artifices, but the panic I felt in that moment. And I think that was a perfect scene to begin Magnus's character development. He's usually quite an impulsive character. He is quite chill as a person, but he does act with magic. He doesn't tend to think things through. But when Ragnor was holding Max, all of that went out the window, and I've never seen Magnus so defeated and so powerless in that situation, because he was not going to move an inch if it meant that Max was in danger. So they stopped to gather the original team because they need to go to Shanghai to hunt down Ragnor and Shinyun. Isabelle turning up in a full-on outfit for the meeting is iconic. She is my spirit animal. I tend to overdress for things, and I love her for that. I know I keep saying that the main characters shouldn't be in this book as much, but I think Isabelle deserved some more scenes. You know, later on she full-on disappears for a few chapters. And I think especially as Alec's sister, she deserved to have more scenes out of all of the other supporting characters. This book was absolutely hilarious at the start when they're talking about what to do about this greater demon, how the situation is bad for the earth, and Simon says, "That's bad for us, we live here." Living. I full on burst out laughing so many moments like this because Simon brought such an innocence to this book, and he also had a great development throughout because we were not really able to see the aftermath of what happened at the Shadowhunter Academy and how that affected him mentally to see his best friend die at the Ascension. That is a little traumatizing, isn't it? So I enjoyed seeing that mix of him trying to lighten up his situation but reaching his breaking point. We get a nice piece of information where we find out that Jem's family runs the Shanghai Institute, and any mention of Jem, Tessa, or Will, you know, sets me off. Something I love about going to all of the other institutes in all of the books is that we learn something different about each of the cities and how different shadow hunting actually is, depending on the culture and the place. In Shanghai, they have snake demons and rope darts. It was really cool to see the New York Shadowhunters kind of react to the different weapons that they use and how different the Downworlder relations are there. I didn't anticipate such a connection to the infernal devices in this book, which you all know by now is my favourite Cassandra Clare book. We had the history surrounding the Yin Fen, which you remember is what Jem was addicted to, how Jem's mother's sister killed Yun Lao, and how her granddaughter is now at the Institute. And it was so great seeing all the ancestors and how they affected the Shadowhunter history there. I cackled at Maris and Camille trying to babysit Max, and how Camille is walking around with a large cushion in case Max decides to drop from the ceiling because he's using his warlock powers. Such a good scene. I also quite enjoyed the foreshadowing to the dark artifices because they mention Johnny Rook here. Oh, again with the history, another thing that completely stuck out to me. They're talking about Chinese purgatory and how souls go down there to be tortured for their sins before they are reincarnated. It kind of feels like a council, sort of. There's judges and they decide which hell you go to. Okay, so they make it to hell, how nice. Been here before, this is just deja vu. But anyway, we start with a flashback to how Magnus was brought up, and I really can't recall whether this is mentioned to us before. I know that he was involved with Ragnor a lot, but I don't remember the fact that he was brought up by the Silent Brothers a little bit at the start of his life and how he stayed in the Silent City. So then Simon goes missing because of course in the vortex all the portals are broken. He ended up somewhere else. I love the detail. Ragnar's tracker was actually correct. It took them to the modern day Shanghai as opposed to the Hell Dimension, which is the same thing but somewhere else. Now Samael's sense of humour was such a highlight in this book when they first meet him and he introduces himself as the maker of the way, once and future devourer of worlds. So Tiana's evil. I was a little taken aback, excuse me. You seemed so cool. And also you're descended from Jem, this is not allowed. Something I really appreciated was the scene after we find out and Magnus completely loses his shit when Tiana's trying to explain that he's working for Samuel as his employee. Also laughed at Samuel referring to him as such, and he's saying that he did it for love because he's in love with a fae and that's forbidden at the moment. And Magnus just burst out, "That is bullshit." You never ever hear Magnus swear, ever. And that felt like a breaking point. And in this book, so many times Magnus surprised me. So but then we find out that Tian was actually a double agent. Thank you, I'm not having Jem's ancestors be evil, because we already have one of that in another series. So a fight ensues and they lose Samuel a little bit and they get Simon back, and Clary, Jace and Alec are talking about the parabatai bond. This is something I really love within the Shadowhunters universe, and you are a good parabatai, Clary. Watching you and Simon together and Jace cuts in, it's like seeing the two of us. I was so mad at Magnus when he went rogue and went to save Ragnor and not tell anyone. This is my most hated trope. Miscommunication is such a get out for any situation. It is also really disrespectful to your partner and soulmate. I know you don't want to put them in danger. It always ends up blowing up in someone's face, and they lost the swords. I really did love the scene with Ragnor and Magnus when they're talking about Max and Magnus's upbringing, and he has to tell him that Raphael died, and I did not need to be reminded of that. But again, in true Shadowhunter fashion, we're given some great comedic relief where Magnus is talking about how him and Alec are going to change the laws and how it's going to be legal for a Downworlder and a Shadowhunter to be married. And he says, when we get married and have it recognised, then we'll do it. Only then. When it's legal for me to marry Alec and for Tian to marry Yin Feng, who is the fae that he's in love with. And then Ragnar says, for Xinyan to marry Samuel. That really reminded me of Voldemort and Bellatrix for some reason. Now we have to talk about Alec and the stabbing, because when it first occurred, it's like, sorry, excuse me, this is not Alec behaviour, what do you mean? He doesn't make stupid, rash decisions like this. And then the page later explains how Alec didn't like acting on hunches. He liked to study a situation, make a plan, and so alarm bells were going off in my head and I thought there must be a reason for why this is happening, right? I do quite enjoy seeing characters go rogue, but it is quite satisfying seeing someone act out their actual personality traits. So the fact that he had a whole strategy with this whole situation, and that's why they used the alliance rune a few chapters before, it was the last puzzle piece being put into place, and those sorts of details is something I really enjoy about the Shadowhunter Chronicles. Okay, so they all make it back safely and Tian is talking to Alec when he says that the Lightwood family have to be part of the clave in the future because that's the only way that change can be made. Listen, if you've read the Dark Artifices, oh, the foreshadowing. So I think the end of this book had a really great cliffhanger, and the fact that they're now looking for Lucifer makes me so excited, because while this whole plot, I was thinking, you know, why did you have to go back to hell again and carry out pretty much the same plot, except we had a guarantee that everyone's going to make it this time. And I'm very curious to see what sort of time jump again we're going to see, because I feel like this series is specifically there to fill in the gaps of all the other series. So I'm not sure if this has been confirmed, but I feel as though next book is going to skip the Dark Artifices and it's going to bridge the gap between it and the Wicked Powers. But overall, I had a really great time. There's something so fun and adventurous about these stories, and you're returning to a world that you're familiar with. And I really did enjoy the extra character development to characters that we thought had their story finished in City Family Fire, and it's great to see them in a more mature relationship. We also know why Jace ultimately decided to take the position as head of the Institute of New York. So I hope you enjoyed this book talk. Make sure to leave your thoughts of the book below so we can keep on discussing. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!